Hello, and welcome to this session at FHIR North. My name is Widgets, and today I will talk to you about how to create an implementation guide with Simplifier. And not just any implementation guide, but one that is easy to maintain as we continue to build out new versions of our FHIR resources. Let me start by introducing myself. As I said, my name is Widgets, and I'm a product manager here at FHIR for all our FHIR data modeling. And that includes the tools Forge, Simplifier, FHIR Terminal, anything you need to build a FHIR implementation guide. You can reach out to me during this session. I'll be monitoring the Q&A, via my email address here, or as Widgets on any other platform. As I said, I work at FHIR, and FHIR is one of the co-writers of the original FHIR specification. And since then, we've been developing all the software, services, and training that you need to bring FHIR to life. And we're also one of the organizers of FHIR Dev Days, which is like FHIR North, but then a conference for the global audience of implementers around the world. The session is pre-recorded, but you can reach out to me in the Q&A after this session, in the chat, or at the end of this session. I'll be also there live for answering any questions that you may have. So before we dive into the actual building of the implementation guide, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page on what it actually means to develop a FHIR project over time. So here I have a schematic overview of what a FHIR project normally looks like. You start here with a use case where you think that FHIR may help over time to bring interoperability and make it easier to work together. Then from that use case, you start making an inventory of the logical model. You start collecting which entities there are, which attributes they have, which terminologies you need to use, but this is still separate from the specific FHIR data model and the resources that are defined in there. And that really happens in the build step, and that's where we enter this FHIR development cycle, where we take Forge or FHIR shorthand, and with that we take our logical model and map it into the data model from FHIR itself. And as we build those resources over time, we do quality control on them, and then we have our resources that are in development and that are being considered for actual publishing. Next, once you have those resources, we need to document them. So we, on top of the machine-readable artifacts, we add information that humans can use to document this implementation guide, to read how they can use the resources. And this documentation is what we call an implementation guide, or the documentation around our resources. So once we have those two in development artifacts, we can consider publishing them over time. And that's where we start building these FHIR release artifacts on the top right. So once we publish, maybe our first version is being called 0.0.1, and we make a FHIR package out of all the machine readable artifacts. And this is just a fancy zip file of all our resources in a specific format that can be used to distribute our resources to the world or anyone that we want to have access. And together with this package, with the machine readable artifacts, we also release a implementation guide that documents them. So that also gets stamped with a version over time, which is 0.0.1 in this case. So that's the first time that we've released any artifact. And then, of course, we go to collecting feedback on that. So we work with our stakeholders, get all the feedback that we want on the implementation guide. And we continue through our build cycle, develop new resources, make changes to them, document those changes, and publish them over time. And then we build out different versions over time of both our package and our implementation guide. And we end here with the 1.2.0, where we have a nice implementation guide that people can read. Now that we've seen the FHIR release cycle, we also see how important it is to keep our guides maintainable as we continue to develop and release. And that's where we're going to focus on three things during this exercise. First, make our guide look pretty and make it match our brand styling. Secondly, make it easy to keep adding new pages and keep them consistent with templating. And finally, making sure that it's easy to keep our pages up to date by using widgets and dynamic tables. For this demonstration, we're going to be using Simplifier. A Simplifier is a collaboration platform for working together on developing FHIR resources and publishing them to the world. Simplifier is being used by many countries, for example, Germany, the UK, the United States, but also the Canadian FHIR Registry is being built on Simplifier. And the Canadian FHIR Registry has all the FHIR projects from Canada that are being developed here. And they work together on this platform to develop the resources and go through the entire build cycle of documenting, publishing, and getting feedback. The implementation guide we will be developing today will be for the hypothetical organization of ACME, and then specifically ACME Canada. For this, we're going to reuse the resource that we've developed in last year's FHIR North talk, where we went through the exercise of building FHIR profiles, value sets, extensions, and a set of example resources. And then we've built a simple guide, we published it, and then we got feedback here in the Issues tab. Right now, we're going to work on building a more elaborate implementation guide and focus just on the documentation and the publishing step. On the implementation guide tab here, we're going to start a new implementation guide with the Create button. We're going to give this a title, ACME Canada 2023 IG, and we're going to make this a public implementation guide. In the implementation guide editor, we can build out the structure for our implementation guide. Currently, we have only one folder, but let's add a few best practice pages here. So when I'm here at the home folder, I can add new pages, like for example, this table of contents page, or I can also add new folders. For example, a folder with all the background information for our implementation guide. So let me build out a few more pages and come back to you. Now that our structure is in place, let's have a look at making actual content for the pages. So going back to the home page, I've already added some links in Markdown for where you can find best practice on what to add to your implementation guide. So you can see that we can write Markdown here in the middle, and on the right we directly see a rendering of what we have typed. Besides regular Markdown, we can also use widgets that Simplifier provides to make special entries into the page. For example, let's build out our table of contents page and add a widget here, and I add 2 curly brackets, and Simplifier will autocomplete all the things it can do for you. And in this case, I'm gonna add a index, which is a table of contents, and let's start that from the root of the entire implementation guide. And now I can hit Ctrl Enter or the little refresh button here, and we directly see the rendering of our entire page here. Now that we have a bit of content, let's look what our implementation guide actually looks like with the preview button here. And this is our implementation guide live and ready to use. So here we are at the table of contents, and here we are on the home page of our implementation guide. This looks nice, but maybe we can give it a bit of more ACME styling. So let's go back to the editor, and here we find the settings menu under the little hamburger icon. And in the settings menu, we can make changes to our implementation guide settings overall. So edit some description, version number, keep it public. And under style, we can decide what the best style for our implementation guide is. So maybe instead of the tree style, let's go for the 2-level menu style. And let's have a look what that looks like. Great, so this is already way more like I expected this. And now the next level is that we can add some tuning to this. So instead of using the default style, we're going to customize this style with our own CSS and HTML to make it look like the Acme brand guidelines. So I hit customize here. I make the Acme Canada style. And now I have my own style that I can customize. And again, we go to the little hamburger icon here, and here we can edit the CSS and the HTML for the page. So here we are in the HTML master template editor. And we see that we can edit the HTML here, and on the right we see what our guide will look like. And the guide is already responsive, so we see this is currently the mobile design, but if we make it a bit wider, we can see that this is the desktop design. And I like this little text, but I think it's nicer to have the Acme logo there. So let's try to replace that with the Acme logo. And I've already prepared a bit of HTML here. So in top of the body, I'm gonna add this little part of HTML. And I've already earlier uploaded the logo. So now when I refresh this, we should have a nice logo here that brings us to the homepage for Acme and have here the details on the Acme implementation guide. But now we have the logo twice, so let's update this and set the logo here to the title to no. And now we have an updated implementation guide with a bit more Acme flair. So next, let's move on to the CSS editor. In the CSS editor, we can easily edit the style for our implementation guide. Again, we see the CSS here in the middle, and on the right, we see what our guide currently looks like. And we have a nice little bar here, but I think I want to make that a bit more expressive. So I found that this little gray line that we have here, it's probably better if we make that into the Acme red color. So here we have the Acme red color, and then if I refresh the page, we have a nice little line here. It's good, but let's make it a bit more firm. So make it 4 pixels instead of 1 pixel. Again, we refresh the page, and now we have on top of our logo also added a nice extra touch of Acme red. Okay, I'll add a bit more styling, and then let's get to the meat and start documenting our resources. Okay, we're back at the Markdown editor, and now we're going to document our first resource. So let's edit a new page under FHIR artifacts for our ease of respiration profile. So I'm going to name this page profile ease of respiration. And our new page automatically has its page title as its title. And let's add a bit of information just to the page. Just some nice readable introduction maybe, and maybe a paragraph about its scope and usage. And then it's time to document the resource in the views that you're familiar with from Simplifier. So again, we can add a widget here. And in this case, let's add the tree widget here. And the tree widget, I want to document here one of our Canada resources. And in this case, it's ease of respiration. There it is. So it has autocomplete here for all the canonicals within my scope. So the ease of respiration profile. And I can add a nice tree view as easy as that. So now we've added the default tree view here, and we can see it's a structure definition on observation, but we can also add different views here. And maybe in this case, I'm gonna add some buttons, so we can switch between different views. buttons. So now we have a nice switcher between the differential, the hybrid, and the snapshot view. So that's cool. And that's a nice view, but I also want to add some other views that I'm familiar with from Simplifier, like for example, the dictionary view. So let's add another, widget with ease of respiration. And now below our tree, we also have the dictionary view for the entire resource. And maybe instead of having them under each other, it would be nicer to have them actually be in a different tabbed browser, so we can see we have a better overview of the page. So there's another widget in Simplifier for that, and we can use the tabs HTML command for that. So one tabs before and one close the tabs after, and then for every tab we can add a little tab here and close the tab. Okay, and now we have two tabs and we can switch between the tree and the detailed view. And let's give the tab each a title. So this is going to be our tree view, and the other tab title is detailed view. Perfect. Okay, we have some more widgets to add, XML and a JSON, but we see that we are repeating here the canonical multiple times. So instead of doing that, we can also remove it here and instead document on top of the page what this page is about. So we do this by adding this little these dashes here, and this indicates that this is metadata about the page. And now I can say, okay, on every widget here on the page, I want you to document the resource with the name ease of respiration. So this is the name of the canonical resource, and that means that I can remove specifying on every individual widget what I want to be talking about, and instead I can just define it once on top. And now it's also way easier to add more tabs here. So let's add 2 more tabs. And one for the XML. So we're gonna call that XML, and we're gonna use the XML widget. And we're also gonna add the JSON and call that tab JSON. Great. So let's see in a preview what our page looks like. And we have a nice introduction into the resource. And we have a tabbed browser here where we can switch already between the different views of the tree, but also to the detailed view, the XML, and the JSON of the resource. Now, when we start documenting our second resource, we of course need to fill in all the specific information about this resource. So we've given a new page with a new page name. We've specified that this page is now about another profile called maintained device. We've given some specific scope and usage text for this specific resource, but setting up all the widgets, we don't want to redo that. So this is where we're going to use templating. So I'm going to go back to my previous profile, and I'm going to copy the setup that we made with all the widgets, showing all the different tabs with all the different views. And I'm going to change this into a template. So I'm just gonna remove this here, and under FHIR artifacts, I'm going to add a hidden page. So for this, I'm going to turn on the visibility of hidden pages. And once I've done that, I can also add a new invisible page here. And this invisible page, I'm going to call that resource overview or resource overview. And in this resource overview, I am going to add the different widgets. And just to make sure that it works, I'm going to test name ease of respiration, just to make sure that the widget works. Okay, so this hidden page will not show up in our navigation, but it is something that we can use in our other pages. So in both of the pages, I'm going to say, please render here the page called resource overview. And again, there's autocomplete for my pages here. So I can just hit enter. And when we show the page, we see that we have the nice widget rendering here. So I'm just gonna copy this page rendering and also add it here. And now every time, copy it, copy. And now every time that I make a change to this little widget in the resource overview, it's going to be updated in both of my pages at once. So until now, we've seen how widgets make it easy to embed views of your resources within Simplifier and keeping them automatically up to date when your resources change. And also how templating makes it easy to have consistent pages there where you only need to change one template if you want to make a change on many different pages at once. There's one more trick for maintainability that I want to teach you, and these are dynamic tables with the FHIR query language. So, for example, you want to add to the top of your page here a nice little table which shows all the metadata for this resource, like the name, the status, and the canonical. You could, of course, embed a nice markdown table here. But every time you made a change to, for example, the status of the resource, you would need to update that. You need to remember to update that also within your page. And that's, of course, a recipe for things going out of sync and a headache for maintainability. So this is why we made up the FHIR query language. And this is a very SQL-like language where we're just going to give it a command here to show that we are going to type the FHIR query language here. So this is a little code block specifically for FHIR query language. And within this, we can write our FQL language, which is very much like SQL. So I can say from, and this selects in all the resources that are in my project. So I'm going to filter down to just the structure definitions. So from structure definition, where I only want to get the metadata from this one resource, the ease of respiration. So the structure definition where the name equals ease of respiration. And from that resource, I want to select. Let's see if we can select the name and the type and the status and the canonical URL. And you see that quickly we have a nice little table that has all the information from our resource, and that will automatically be updated if you make any changes to your resources. So this gives you a very nice way to keep your documentation up to date. To make it a bit prettier, we can give it a different name. So maybe we say profile as a title for this column. And here we say type, status, and canonical. Great. So this quickly we have a nice little table of metadata. If the query that you're going to write is a bit more difficult than just a simple table like this one, there's also an FQL Playground that you can work with to quickly prototype if you're getting the right table. So for this, we're going to go to the project. And from here, we're going to select the query. And here we can also find the documentation of FQL. Right now, we're going straight to the query on the current Acme Canada project. And here we can even turn on the live rendering of the query that we've made here. So let's try to make a table with all the terminology bindings that our profile has. So again, we're going to say, okay, select from structure definition where name is ease of respiration. And now we don't want just the metadata for this resource, but we want for every differential element, we want to check whether there is a terminology binding. So we're going to say, instead of directly select, we're going to say for differential.element, select the path. Okay, so these are all the different paths within our differential. But then, of course, we want to know whether there is a binding. So we're going to say binding dot strength. Strength is maybe one column. Okay, so we see that there is one element here that actually has a binding with a required strength. And then let's also get the binding dot value set. So if you just look in the JSON, you can see what are the right paths that you need to look at. So here we have a nice table that shows us all the different value set bindings, but we of course want to filter out all the paths here that do not have a value set binding. So we're going back here to the for class. And here we're going to say, okay, I only want to see elements where there actually is a binding strength. Binding strength dot exist. Okay, and this is the table that we want to have. So now we can copy this and bring this back to our implementation guide. So at the bottom of our resource page, we will just add an extra heading here with our terminology. And here we can just add a code block, an FQL code block, and directly paste the query that we've made in the FQL Playground. And now it's time to see how our final guide has turned out. So let's look at the preview here. And this is what it is. We've seen our FQL code blocks. We see our reusable widget with the different views from the resource. And all of these will automatically update when your resources change. And that's of course what we want when we are developing the project. But now it's time to make a final release of the 1.2 guide together with our package. So we have already previously published that package. And now it's time to make sure that we render the resources from that package and not the live ones from the project anymore. So currently our scope is set to the project, but in the settings we can change that. And we can set the scope to our published package. So here I'm going to search for our Acme Canada 2023 package, show all versions, and I'm going to document the 1.2.0 version of that package. And now every resource that's shown within our implementation guide is that version from that package. And then the final thing that's left to do is to make a release of this implementation guide. So we go to the hamburger menu again and we say publish. And from our implementation guide, we're going to release the 1.2.0 version. We're going to make this a public release that is read-only and is the default for anyone coming to our implementation guide. And then we hit publish. And that's the final step to having a released implementation guide and going through our entire publishing process. So this is the 1.2 version of the implementation guide that is now available for anyone to use. And that brings us to the conclusion of our session. Thank you so much for following along. I hope that you take away that we've built an implementation guide that is easy to maintain when we go through the cycle of developing new versions of our implementation guide and the underlying resources. We've done this by matching our brand styling and making sure it looks pretty, keeping pages easily consistent with templating, and also making sure that your resources and everything that comes from the resources are automatically updated if anything changes within those resources. You can reach out to me via these contact details on the screen, and I'll also be available live in person to answer any questions that you may have now. Thank you.